So I realized hashtag not all landlords, and I realized I got a whole bunch of folks that, I mean, it kind of took off. My little video yesterday that I did, that TikTok banned, and then they put it back on the internet. They claimed that I was attacking somebody. I really wasn't. I'm just pointing out some math here. And when you price yourself out of a market, right, the old way of doing things, old school way of buying a rental property, right, was that you would look at, like, can the market that you're in afford that? Can that market absorb the rents that you're wanting to charge? Because if the market can't, then what ends up happening is you start squeezing your tenant. Now, you don't want to squeeze your tenants. The reason you don't, by the way, and I'm just saying this as a businessman, the reason you don't want to squeeze your tenants is because, well, it leads overall to a lot of the problems that we're seeing right now in the greater economy. You're seeing people spending too much money on all of this. They're not saving. And that's going to lead to a lot of other problems. So, and also, I would go so far, I think I said this yesterday, the United States was never intended to be a nation of renters. It was never intended for that. It was designed to be a nation of people who owned their property and lived there. And they lived on their property, on their land, and they were Americans, and that was kind of the deal. You didn't want to have a nation of renters. It is the season right now. It's December. You go watch It's a Wonderful Life. That isn't really a Christmas movie, but it's in December. And the reason why they keep playing that in December, it's not an accident that Christmas was chosen as sort of a plot device in that movie. When Frank Capra, who was a staunch anti-communist, by the way, you can look up Frank Capra. He framed it in December because December 23rd, 1913 is when the Federal Reserve was created, and it created all the problems you're seeing now, right? So, and I'm gonna, in fact, actually, that segues nicely into what I'm gonna read here. So just pointing this out, this isn't long. These are some old tweets that I pointed out a long time ago, that in 1915, the average annual income for a working man was $687 a year. Not per week, per year, $687 per year. So that's $57.25 per month in 1915. That was the average. Okay, so cut to 1940. Okay, so this is prior to our entry into World War II. The average annual income for a working man. Remember, this is one guy working. This is not with two-income households, because that didn't really become a thing until, really in earnest, until the 70s and 80s. That's when that kind of started becoming a thing. Well, 1940, the average annual income for working men was $1,368, okay, approximately $114 per month, okay? So we've nearly double what it was from just 25 years earlier, okay? This is a sign that actually your currency is being printed to the point of it's going to start losing its value. So, and of course, let me just tie this off for a second, and let me go back to the landlords for a second. For a lot of you that are like, well, no, I'm buying real estate so that way I can have cash flow. You don't really need to have cash flow if your currency doesn't lose its value. True story, okay? If your currency isn't losing its value, then you don't need to try and keep making it up by, in other words, you're working very hard to make very little return. Because you're just keeping up with inflation. If real inflation is 20%, but you're making 20%, how much did you make? Zero. You worked very hard to make 0% return. And I would argue you're better. You were better off working at a third shift at a Dairy Queen than you were for that. So, 1950. Okay, this changes. Again, average salary for a working man was $3,300 annually. Okay, that's $275 a month. So over double of the earnings of just 10 years. So. Now you could say, like, well, but we need to have that kind of expansion. This is a Keynesian kind of warped lie that gets pushed out there that, like, well, you can keep expanding. You can expand for a little while. How do you expand an economy? You have people. In other words, you have kids, right? You have women having kids. That's how you get the economy to expand. Well, the boomers, and again, I've been over this before, the reason they're called baby boomers is because it was abnormal. It was a baby boom. It was a lot of people being born. And that creates the growth in the economy. If you want to keep those numbers, then you have to keep having people having kids. But they're not. They're all of a sudden, they're saying, I don't want to have kids. I just saw there was a video yesterday. It's floating around Twitter. It's like it's this dink video, like dual income, no kids, and these young people are happy about, like, I don't want to have any children. I want to be able to buy, you know, Costco hot dogs or something. It's just kind of ridiculous, you know, when you look at this, like, well, why couldn't you do both? Why couldn't you have kids and buy hot dogs? You know, and it's like, well, because it would be too expensive. Like, okay, well, I mean, fair enough, but that just means that the economy suffers in the future, right? And now apply that to the 80s and 90s, right? And that's what we're seeing now. Okay, so we're on the back end of this. Okay, remember, 1961 was the peak birth year for baby boomers. Okay, and that was the peak, 1961. That means in 1993 they would have been about, you know, they would have been, you know, in their 30s and early 30s, you know, and wanting to buy houses and furniture and so forth. Well, we're on the back end of that. Okay, so anyway, and by the way, just as a side note, independent, you know, like an independent physician in 1950s made about 3.5 times the average, which is where the kind of idea that doctors are rich, because they made 3.5 times or so the average, and I don't think that they do anymore. I don't know if it is 3.5 times that much. I don't think it's that much any longer, especially given that physicians now are having to invent diseases to chop body parts off children and stuff. So anyway, by 1960, incomes for working men had gone up to $5,600 annually, so $466 a month. And for perspective on this, the average home price in 1960 was just under $12,000, $11,900. So, and keep in mind also, there's also a whole bunch of other costs that didn't exist. There wasn't a bunch of HOA fees. There also wasn't back-end points, or, well, what you guys call is mortgage insurance. There's no such thing as mortgage insurance. It's just a way for them to stick you for another 1 to 2 points on the back end. It's all it is. It's why when it's no mistake when or no accident when you go to like the signing table, right? And you're like, okay, how much is my payment going to be? And the mortgage broker tells you all these lies about what your payment's going to be. And then when you get to the signing table, it's all of a sudden you're like, hold on, this is like $230 more than what you told me. Well, yeah, it's because they're back ending the hell out of it and everything. And oh well, the bank, you know, this is your final rate, your final rate, after you went and did everything in the world to qualify for that stupid mortgage. So, and just, you know, so we go down, you know, if we go down the list, we'll just do this very quickly. You know, median home price, you know, in the U.S. This is an indictment of the dollar. This is not an indictment of any one person. You know, I mean, if you want to know who the problem is, everybody go to look in the mirror. That's who the problem is. You've let your currency become garbage. I mean, that's really what it's turned into. In 1940, house was $2,938. 1950, $7,354. 1960, $11,900. 1970, $17,000. 1980, $47,200. So in 10 years, it like tripled, right? I mean, virtually tripled. So 1990 went to $79,100. 1990. Okay. Now I realize that certain, by the way, certain areas, obviously, it's going to be a little different based on where you're located. So these are averages. And then by 2000, it went to 119.6. Today, you know, I read conflicting reports. I've seen everything from 416,000 to like 464. Well, none of the incomes have kept up with that, guaranteed. And the reason they haven't is because they can't keep up with that. If they were to keep up with that, it would expose hyperinflation, the hyperinflationary nature of the dollar, and this would mean that all of a sudden, you know, all of that money that boomers are promised in all these you know, 401ks and so forth would become worth less and less and less. They wouldn't have. They'd have to spend $600 to put gas in their car. That's what ends up coming out to be. So these kinds of things are all of this is causing a lot of the problems that you're seeing. And I mentioned this yesterday just very briefly, which, you know, like for all you people that are always chiming in about the culture war, a lot of the finance issues are causing a lot of the problems in the culture war that, you know, that if you fix the money, you will fix a lot of these problems, but you're not going to fix it the way you're going about it. There's no way to there's no fixing this anymore. Not with the way that anybody that I'm seeing, and certainly not with probably any of the guys, you know, running to be King Dingling, a clown world. They're not going to, like, none of this is going to be fixed the way that they think there's going to happen. So those are just some numbers, and we'll see you next time.